Well, the world and their Christmas machine turns, and we're surrounded by mistletoe and Christmas wreaths and Christmas trees and joy. The first story of Advent does not begin that way. In fact, Advent begins in the dark. It was in the darkness in which Jesus came. It was the first Advent where there was darkness, a sense of longing, a sense that there must be more, as the people of God in Israel were waiting for their long-expected Jewish king and the line of David. But now Israel was not what it once was, and there was just a constant reminder of loss and pain and darkness. Advent begins in the dark. And so here we are on this first Sunday of Advent and coming out of Thanksgiving. It is officially the holiday season. And this is the season where everyone tells us that we must feel joyful. I tell you, I've had 3 conversations this week with 3 different people who are dreading the holidays. The holidays for them are the reminders of what they don't have. The holidays for them are a reminder of the loss and ache and pain. The holidays are a reminder of the emptiness that they already feel. Maybe hopelessness feels even heavier. Maybe for you, Thanksgiving didn't quite feel like a blessing this year. Maybe for you, Thanksgiving felt lonely this year. Maybe you're wondering, what is the point of all of this? And maybe gratitude is the last thing on your mind. Meanwhile, the Hallmark Christmas machine continues to churn and tell us all the reasons why we should be happy. And maybe you're one of those that's just struggling to find any sense of hope. Advent begins in the dark. A sense of yearning for hope. But what the story of Advent reminds us is that hope isn't something that we can churn up. Hope isn't something that we can muster up. Hope isn't something that we strive for. But what the story of Advent reminds us is that hope is something that comes to us. This morning, I want to look at the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 24 through 35. Where we discover a woman who had every reason to be hopeless, who had every reason to feel as though most of her life she had been left in the dark. She had every reason to despair. And she discovers that hope comes to her in the person of Jesus. Let's take a look at Mark's Gospel, chapter 5, beginning at verse 24. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that the power had gone out from him, and he turned around in the crowd and asked him, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered. "And yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace, be freed from your suffering." This is the reading of God's holy word. This woman, who we often refer to as a woman with the issue of blood, her story begins in the darkness. The very first thing that we learn, the very first mention of her biography, and the most timeless book, the very first thing we learn in her biography is that she had been bleeding for 12 years. First of all, I can't even comprehend being sick for that long. Anyone who has any sort of terminal illness or autoimmune disease can relate to just the feeling of feeling hurt and sick and just not yourself. And for 12 long years, this was her story. But not only that, she would have been considered ceremonial unclean, according to Jewish traditions. When a woman was bleeding, she was considered to be unclean, and there were all sorts of different rules of who she could commune with, who she could or couldn't break bread with. And so because of this, because she was unclean, she had been casted out from the people of God. She had lost her health. She had lost her family. She had lost her community. She had lost her dignity. She had lost her identity. But this particular day, she had some sort of grain of hope, a mustard seed of faith. She thought, maybe, just maybe, if I could just get through the crowds and get towards Jesus, maybe if I could just rub shoulders with him, maybe if I could just get a flicker, a hold on to his cloak, or just rub next to him, maybe, just maybe, then I'll have hope. I'll be healed. And that's exactly what she does. For a moment, for a flicker, for a millisecond, she touches his cloak. And even though there are great crowds surrounding Jesus, pushing up next to him, Jesus stops and he says, someone has just touched me. I felt the power leave my body. And the disciples, of course, were in a crowd. Everybody's touching you. Everybody's around you. Everybody's close to you. And he said, no, this touch was different. I felt the power leave my body. And I imagine this scene of everybody just standing back, wonder who would have the audacity? Who would even dare? Who would have the gall to do that? And this woman, hanging on to that last morsel or thread of hope, that mustard seed of faith in that moment, she is trembling in fear, uncertain if she is going to be rejected because she is unclean and she touched the Holy One. Trembling with fear, she falls on her face before Jesus. Says, it was me. And notice how Jesus responds to her. Jesus could have said, you are unclean. And you have the audacity, the gall to come and touch the clean, the Holy One. But what we see is what I love what Scott McKnight calls. He says that Jesus is the contagion of purity. In her touch towards him, Jesus purified her. And so he doesn't shame her. Instead, he looks at her so tenderly and he says, daughter, your faith has healed you from your suffering. Now go in peace and be free from your suffering. Something that day sparked within her. And one morsel, one moment, 1 millisecond in the presence of Jesus changed everything. Changed everything. And this is the story of Advent, that just one moment with Jesus can change everything. Perhaps you know what it's like to search for hope. I see it all the time. People searching for meaning. I sat with a friend yesterday and she said, I just don't know what my purpose in life is anymore. As she remarked on dreading the holidays. And I watch so many search for hope in so many different ways, and oftentimes it's very material. If I could just have more money, more success, more accolades, if I could just have this house or the greater job or the bigger bonus, or if I could just be in this relationship, or if I could just do this or have these people, then maybe that's my hope. Maybe things then will be okay. The woman in this story probably also tried so many different things. But Jesus dignifies her. Jesus, When he calls her daughter, he restores her. He restores her back into the community. He restores her identity. He restores her health. He restores her back to hope once again. And in a single moment, Jesus transforms her entire story. Hope is not something we have to muster up, but hope is found in a person. Jesus steps into the darkness, our darkness, and it is his presence that changes everything. And in stepping in, Jesus sees you, knows you, loves you, welcomes you. Perhaps you are one of those people that I described at the beginning of this message, and you thought, does she read my journal? Maybe you thought, is she talking to me? I'm one of those people that dreads the holiday season. I'm one of those people that I have this incredible sense of emptiness. Maybe the holidays for you have been a terrible reminder of what is missing in your life, or what hurts, or what hasn't gone the way that you had hoped. I don't know who needs to hear this, but someone does. Jesus sees you. And in one moment, the presence of Jesus can change everything. What I love about this story is this woman didn't have a perfect plan. And I am sure that she even was filled with doubts. I'm sure that she was even wondering if she had enough faith. I'm sure that she had more questions than answers. Scripture doesn't tell us that we have to believe everything, and that we have to have all of the faith, that we have to have faith as large as a mustard tree, but we have to have just enough faith, just a glimmer, just a morsel. And she believed that if she could just touch his clothes, she would be healed. And the presence of Jesus changed everything. I recently read a story about a British physician who was one of the early doctors researching and treating AIDS patients. And sadly, he had contracted AIDS while doing research in Zimbabwe. And during his final days, his body was failing, his speech was even failing. And he took a piece of paper and a pen and he wrote the letter J and gave it to his wife. And his wife went then to medical dictionaries and just started looking for anything that started with a J that might be what he's trying to tell her. Was it a medicine that he needed? Was it a drink that he needed? And finally, the light bulb came on and she went to him. And she said, "Is it Jesus?" And that was it. It was the presence of Jesus. And suddenly she had an overwhelming peace that everything was okay, because that was all that they needed. My friends, hope is not found in having a perfect holiday gathering. Hope is not found in having a perfectly decorated house. Hope is not found in presents or dinners, but it is found in a person, and his name is Jesus. Hope is not found in an applause or accolades from others. Hope is not even found in vacations or temporary distractions and pleasures. Hope is not found in the hustle or filling our calendars or busying our lives or doing more. Hope is not found in the sports that we do or the sports that we don't do, or in the grades that we get or in the grades that we don't get. Hope is not found when everything is just right. Hope is also not found in the bottom of a glass or other things that we do to numb our pain. Hope is not found by working harder and working more hours or striving more or trying to do everything or do it all. Hope is not found in the traditions that we keep or the traditions we are unable to keep. Hope is not found in the gifts that we are able to give or the gifts that we are not able to give. Hope is not found in what we can control or success. Hope is not found in what you own or what you don't own or what you drive or what you wear. Hope is not found in what you have gained or perfection. Hope is not found in making everyone happy and feeling like we have to be the people pleaser. We have to be the peace peacemaker. Hope is not found in avoiding all conflict, but instead, my friends, I don't know who needs to hear this today, but hope is found in a person, and his name is Jesus. His name is Jesus, and he is the one who brings light into the darkness. He is the one who sees you when no one else sees you. He is the one who welcomes you when you feel as though no one else in your life or your circle is welcoming you. He knows your pain. He knows your story. He knows your joys. He knows your ups. He knows your ticks. He knows your downs. He knows your longings. He knows your yearnings. He knows your secrets, and he loves you anyway. He is the one who brings hope when you feel as though you only have a morsel left. He is the one who brings peace in the middle of the storm. He is the one who walks with you through the valley of the shadow of death. He is the one who fills you with joy even when your circumstances tell you that you should not have joy and that you have no reason to be joyful. He is the one that walks through you through the crises of life. He is the one who calls you his own. He calls you daughter. He calls you son. He calls you friend. He calls you brother. He calls you sister. He is the one who can take beauty from ashes. He is the one who pierces the light with the darkness, who can move from life, who can move for life from death. And he is the one who is with you always and forever and forgives you and welcomes you just as you are. He is hope. And hope is found in a person, and his name is Jesus. Hope is found in a person, and his name is Jesus. Maybe today all you have is a mustard seed of faith. Maybe today you feel as though you have more doubts than answers. My friends, the labor is not on us, but the labor is on Jesus, who says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me, all of you who are weary, and I will give you rest." Perhaps you are feeling as though you are drowning in your own darkness. I have good news for you. Hope is found in a person. His name is Jesus, and he is here today. Perhaps you're struggling. Let me just say, you have permission to come to God with your doubts. You have permission to come to God with your questions. You have permission to borrow on the faith from others. What we discover is when we come to Jesus just as we are, he sees us, loves us, and welcomes us. And that presence and power changes everything.
Thank you for listening to the Encounter Faith podcast. This podcast is a service of G. Shep Productions from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Naperville, Illinois. All rights reserved. If you're in the area, we'd love to meet you on a Sunday morning at our 9 a.m. or 10:45 services. At Good Shepherd, we are inviting everyone to walk together in the calling of Christ for a life of eternal impact. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Ross Cochran. And our theme song is Wake the Earth by 1111 Worship. Thank you for listening. We'll talk again soon.